Hello and welcome back to another episode on the First Brick Property Podcast, the property and lending show. Today we've got Ferdy Yusuf and Mark Lada as always. How are you boys?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, great. We've also got a very special guest that we teased last week about, and let me introduce him. He's got some accolades, so it might take a bit of time. So we've got Arjun Paliwal, who's the founder of Investor Kit Buyers Agency, which was formed in 2018. It's a data-driven buyers agency business helping a wide range of Australians build successful property investment portfolios. Arjun holds a personal portfolio valued over $8.5 million, so he knows what he's talking about when it comes to buying property. He's the host of his own podcast called The Property Nerds. He's won some awards as well as the Rising Star of the Year winner 2020 and Buyers Agent of the Year finalist in 21 and 22. Also, personally for me, and I don't think Arjun actually knows this, it was a big inspiration for me to become a buyer's agent as well. When I was first starting to become a buyer's agent, and I was having chats with Ben from Buyers Agent Institute, Arjun's name popped up a lot, and I did a bit of stalking and looked into his life, and I thought this guy is living the dream, and I want to do what he's doing. So we have very similar beliefs, I believe, around property and investing and helping clients. And for me, he's been an inspiration and he's really helped me without him knowing, allowing me to become what I do today. So welcome, Arjun, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the kind words, mate, and I'm glad you accept credit card on the introduction part as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known how to cover you for that, man. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Your accolades speak for themselves, mate. You've been around for a long time. You've got a decently large portfolio yourself, and so we thought we'd unpack everything and we just have a nice chat about property and buyers agency and what's happening in the current market. And I might ask the first question, and then I'll let the other boys jump in as well. How did you get involved in property? What was your background? How did you get involved? Where did you start?
There were two inspirations for me, mate. The first one was around the dinner table at home, having my dad invest in property back in New Zealand. We had lots to talk about and lots to hear about as well from his complaint about stuff and this and that. Everything's expensive and this is changing and that's changing. The usual thing us ethnic dads or our ethnic dads tend to shout out. But that was one starting point. I just think like we're just so comfortable talking about money and property and things. So and just see him talk about the stories like how we had to get them. It just feels so dramatic compared to the buying that we do today. It was just so dramatic back in the day. But that was the first piece. The second thing I think would be my career as a banker. Back in the days, banking had the biggest advantage was that you could ask all the questions you wanted and they had no choice but to give you the information. So it's just like the same way in a podcast. It's more, I guess, open and more, we share. It was not by choice in the banking space. Everyone had to share everything for their applications to go through, for everything. So I added just a little bit more curiosity to it than the typical branch manager who would just kind of go about their day and go from loan to loan or approval to approval. My role there was going, hey, you know what? Why don't I actually figure out more about how they got there, why they got there, what are they up to? And those two things inspired it all really for the journey to begin from there.
Yeah, amazing. You've got a very large portfolio, over $8.5 million. How did you start? What was the first one? How did it go from one to quite a large, portfolio? What was the steps involved in scaling? What was the journey like around the actual investing around property?
Yeah, there's a few notable steps which come into the equation. The first step was for sure, like most, getting the house to live in, and things turn into that accidental investment from there. However, that first investment was midpoint of the Sydney property boom. So between 2012 and 2017 was that boom. This was kind of 2015, where I still got a couple of years of gains in there. So that was definitely the starting point. The second point then was having other professionals in the industry scale their portfolios. It kind of gave me that excitement to say, hey, it's possible. My wife and I are in a pretty fortunate position from incomes and saving habits. Why can't we do this? And also the property in Sydney had continued growing from 15 to 17. So then those couple of years ended up being some more acquisitions off the back of inspiration. Then the third phase of the portfolio was realizing whilst that inspiration was well placed by people helping me or wanting to help me, it wasn't exactly the outcome that I'd wanted, other than buying properties. It didn't quite give the growth that I wanted to see in those couple of years. Especially starting off the journey is so powerful when you start off with that healthy capital growth. I didn't get to see that from those first batch of investments I made. So then the third phase of this all was really about me taking ownership and me buying properties using my own data, own research, and that led me to a market that has been my best performer in the portfolio. Then the fourth phase came up, which was, now in the business phase where I'm actually doing it for others and I'm backing my own selections of markets I choose for my clients. So for many clients, we're helping them scale their portfolios, and I'd each year buy a couple in those areas that I'd be recommending for them. And there's nothing more of the excitement I get from being able to celebrate the success with them or say that I bought with them. And that's kind of the four phases I've been through. So from accidental investor to following someone else to realizing that person was well intended but wouldn't work out, and getting it on my own, and then doing it as part of my business as well.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey. There's so many questions I got in there, but I'll see if Ferdy or Mark have a question before I steal the entire spotlight.
You said something so interesting there where you purchased your first property, you didn't see too much capital growth there, and you said that you went on to do it yourself. If you were to do it yourself in that time where you purchased your first investment property, how would it be different? Is it just in regards to the data that you utilized, or?
Yeah, so the first one went well. It was more so that batch of investment properties. Like, so the first home went well, but then the I purchased three investment properties through another professional. And what didn't go well was their analysis. So what I came back to learn was, there's a few things that go well when you're investing in property, affordability being one of them, rental yields being healthy being another, and then market pressure, which is what causes capital growth, and the supply analysis, which will tend to see it continue on, right? And so they had the affordability, they had the rental yield. So you could tell that they saw those 2 points really well, which was, hey, buy in affordable areas with good yields. What they help you with? Easy entry, easy hold. But they weren't very skilled in their analysis of the other two pieces, which were capital growth, market pressure, and supply analysis, the long wind of market pressure when there's not enough supply there, building approvals, listings trends, inventory, things like that. So their weaknesses in those two areas, I realized were weaknesses after I'd held those three properties I'd bought for a couple of years and realized there was no positive momentum here outside of it being just cheap and yields well. And that's kind of when I took it upon my own to get deeper into that analysis to figure out how do I get those last 2 points. And now I get the four key parts of cheap, good yields, strong pressure to go up, and not enough supply. So that was kind of where my analysis went better for those next batch of investments that obviously went a lot better.
That's awesome. And that also comes down to obviously choosing the right buyer's agent as well, which also leads me to my next question. Like, Mark and myself being brokers, the question that comes through at the moment is, should we buy now our investment property, or should we buy an owner-occupied property given how the market's going? Is it reducing? Should we wait to the end of the year? People are saying it's going to drop by the end of the year. But I know KM is always saying there's always opportunity in the market. How do you communicate that sort of opportunity in every market to those sort of customers that are coming in through to brokers? And that's where it leads us to referring, like, this is probably a better conversation with buyer's agent. But just a rough idea, like, to communicate with customers, how do you communicate that in every single market there's an opportunity?
It's a really good question. I think I might break it down to two parts. One is the owner occupier investor piece, and then one is like buying in certain markets. And so with the owner occupier investor piece, I've had my belief change over time from the classic Robert Kiyosaki, owner occupiers don't, their liabilities, don't do it, it doesn't produce income. Like Grant Cardone on the same page of, your house is not an asset and all that sort of stuff. Then I've kind of realized that, hold on a minute, like these guys are also buying massive houses, like in some epic areas, and like saying the opposite of what they're really doing. So I took a moment to step back and figure out my thoughts on owner occupiers, and I feel like I've nailed when it goes wrong, right? So when it goes wrong is where people buy the owner occupier that they can afford, and then they turn it into an owner-occupier that they can afford when their situation's a bit better and get rid of the first or turn it to an investment. Then their situation's better again. Hey, welcome to corporate ladder world. It's going up and up and up, and they go for the next owner-occupier, then the next, then the next. And life just becomes this whole keeping up with the Joneses, improving your owner-occupier, decades and decades of your life sunk into that lifestyle and trying to keep it up and get a nicer home, better suburb, closer to the water, whatever it is. Then all of a sudden you hit 50 and you're like, oh crap, I've got a nice home. I feel really good. I got kids. They've gone out and I don't have any investments. I need to catch up. Then you make decisions like jumping into a seminar and trying to have someone change your life in like 3 hours. And hopefully all this rich equity that you've got in your principal place of residence can make you super rich now, because you need to retire in the next 10 years. And this is where most people make mistakes. Super wealthy people, cash, equity rich in their owner occupiers make mistakes. So where I think the equity, the best way for an owner occupier to consider it is two things. Number one is, if you're going to buy it, buy something that's good enough where you can feel for the next 5 to 10 years, my wealth building plans aren't disrupted. One thing behind you, one less thing to think about. Enhance your lifestyle. Life's short, go enjoy it. But for 10 years, don't ever come back to your investor, advisor, or whoever saying, I'm thinking of buying another home. Don't come back to your broker to say, I'm thinking of buying another home. Think of investments, whether it be stocks, property, whatever floats your boat. You go and make the next 10 years about building wealth. So that's option one. Or option two is, no, just stick what you've got with. You're happy with what you've got and just continue on wealth building. So that's me, right? 2015 till now, if we look at the first property that's now gone up from 970 to 1.65 mil, that's the first home I bought. Between then and now is another 7 million of holdings, which means between then and now, there's every year an opportunity for me to go and ball out in some mansion. Guess what? I didn't do that. I just kept focusing on that 7 mil of investments building up rather than me being in the eastern suburbs or northern beaches for the same 8.5 mil, 9 mil that I have today. So my thinking here is that option two is you're happy with what you've got and you keep going at it. Fortunately, I live down the road from an amazing Sikh temple. I give my blessings, and the food and tea is amazing. The service that we have, it's amazing. So you can't take me away from this place no matter how long it gets, right? No matter how much I could afford more in my places, I just love the community here. I want to stick here as long as possible. So that's option two. Option three for an owner-occupier is go, look, I'll get to it when I get to it. I want to commit to just building wealth, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Whatever I've achieved in my window of wealth building time, I hit that time, the clock. So that clock could be either based on dollar value or time based. So 10 years of investing, then I'll figure out my own owner-occupier goals. And wherever I make it in the 10 years, it is what it is. So that's my solution to owner-occupier buying. One of three things. Buy now, enjoy it. Don't even talk about it again for 10 years. Enjoy what you've got. Don't talk about it for 10 years. Or don't enjoy anything to do with owner-occupier, reinvest, go at it 10, 15 years, and then come back to owner-occupiers. Anything that's not one of these three, you're going to kick yourself later in life, and you're going to think of, how do I catch this up and what do I do? So that's the owner-occupier piece. On the investing side, so the whole opportunity in every marketplace, I think the most common reason why people don't grasp this concept is because they're just time poor. They have only enough time in the day to digest what two people say. One is colleagues and family, and then second is media. And colleagues and family are likely to be in the same boat as them, time poor, and represent a decision that probably only reflects the media. So it all comes back to media. When times are good, they want to get in. When times are bad, they don't want to get in. That's completely the opposite to what you should be doing. And when it comes to really what we look at is, we're just lucky that as professionals, we're able to scan the country, we're able to have word on the ground, we're able to spend all day purchasing it, transact 300 plus times a year. All these different things allow us to just experience the reality of markets within markets, as they call it. So I think from this perspective, we're also going through a period of recency bias, where the recency is that everything went up together. And so people feel that on the opposite, everything should go down together. This whole everything going up or down together probably happened maybe one other time in the last 20 years, which is between 2000 and 2005. So because of all this recency bias. I can understand, and being time poor, why people are thinking like this. But yeah, the truth is they just don't have enough time and don't have enough markets they're looking at to know what's happening. I think, just to share two classic examples, in the market of Adelaide, we shared a post just last week, this week actually, from last Saturday, I think it was, or last week from last Saturday, 73 people across a weekend in open homes. So one buyer got it, it was ours, which means 72 people are still looking for a property. I can tell you right now, in that suburb of Adelaide, there are not 72 properties for sale. So no matter what happens, prices are going up. Just as if CoreLogic reported it for 30th May ending data, the city, I think, went up by 1.9 or 1.8%. Annualize that, that's 24%. Even if you half the rate, that's 12%. A property boom for me is anything double digits.
Yeah.
So from that perspective alone, that clearly shows that for people not seizing that opportunity, it's time and it's experience or understanding what's happening across the country.
So fantastic answer. Just if I can go back on something you were mentioning, your three phases or for the owner occupiers. Do you find there's a difference, or do you find there's a better solution to buy your own home first and then go invest for the next 10, 15 years, or do you find option three where you invest first and then accumulate wealth and do it the other way? Do you find there's one solution that's better financially, or is it horses for courses?
Personally, I'm of the opinion that financially, I think it depends on where you are in your age brackets. If you're in the 20s, that first scenario of buy the best home now and go about it for 10 years and just stay put and enjoy and kind of work on investments from there. I think that's hard because many of those in the 20s might not be on a mature enough income as those in the 30s and 40s. And so as a result, their best one isn't their best one, and they get caught in that same trap again and they go back to it. So they can't quite commit to that same 10 years of just live there and don't do anything else. So I think it depends. For those brackets, I do feel the rent vesting and put that goal to later can become something better. For people who are in that, late stage of family formation, they feel they've got the perfect family of kids and numbers and everything, and they don't want to kind of grow beyond that. And they're at that stage where they're umming and eyeing it. I would say just go and get that owner occupied done with, because I don't want to have a client who's umming and eyeing each and every investment property and they don't get to scale the true way that their portfolio deserves them to scale based on all the hard work they've done in their savings and income. So each time they buy a property, they go back, oh, should we buy the owner occupier now? The next one, oh, should we do it now? And so this constant back and forth, they never really get clarity. So I'd say just go and do it, splurge out, enjoy yourself. You just make sure you can commit to staying there for the next 10, 15 years. And if you can, then we can figure out wealth building afterwards. But yeah, I think it just depends on your life stage and where you're at.
Yeah, makes sense. Mark, do you have any questions, or should I keep
Yeah, I
going?
was going to ask. So, a very common sort of scenario we have is sort of people in their 20s who obviously jumping in the market for the first time is very expensive if you're not using equity or anything else. So, or guarantor loan or anything. So, a lot of them fall into this scenario where they may have like a 12, 13% deposit, and they would ask us, should we, as an investment, should we put the 10% down, pay the LMI? Or should we wait 6 to 8 months when we do have like a full 15, 20% deposit where we can avoid paying LMI? So I just wanted to get your opinion on that. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I started my portfolio a bit fortunate with bank staff benefits, not paying LMI and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
But on that note, it's crazy how many professions there are that still get that waiver. You know what I mean? They're accountants, lawyers, medical professionals. Some banks even teachers and to some extent, or not all banks, but some banks do. So I just think that firstly they should chat with the broking teams like yourself and understanding what can we do on that mortgage insurance waiver piece. But if you can't get that waiver, mortgage insurance is actually your friend. In my opinion, that cost to pay to scale is so small in comparison to the opportunity cost of waiting.
yeah,
So I think that, look, I mean, even to this stage, there's some properties that I have a personal choice, even though I have all the equity to be able to extract the cash on the side to pay 20% deposits. Even today, I still buy stuff at 90% just because I want as much of the bank's money, knowing that if I've got a 20 or 30-year plan, it's not going to matter then.
Okay.
As long as I can service it, as long as I have the buffers for it, as long as I'm comfortable with the rent and cash flow changes that happen when you go that high, I encourage it. At the end of the day, that insurance thing, don't feel like it's this bad thing. It's the bank and the insurer between them figuring out what they want to do and how they want to protect themselves or make some margin up front before giving a loan away with that risk. Whatever their reasons are, let them worry about that. For you, it's X less on a deposit. And so if you back yourself and your ability to have buffers, cover it, make sure you're there, and you back yourself, then the bank's backing you. Might as well take it and make it work for yourself. So it's helped me even to this day. I look at using LMI where I can, even if I have the equity to not have to use it, just because I'd rather have more loan against it.
Okay. And completely unrelated question. I just wanted to get your opinion also on where you think commercial properties would play in someone's portfolio.
Yeah, it's a great question because it's people's chase for income right now is so important considering interest rates and where they're going. I think they play two parts. Either someone who's built a healthy residential portfolio where they say to themselves, got a few properties here, and long term I'll be okay with compound wealth because they will do their thing irrespective. They also play as a bit of a hedge because as you have commercial vacancies, it's nice to know that you've got a few properties with your typical rents coming in. And so that whole period of I can now go into commercial property, and that too, when your servicing's that little bit better on the commercial property and you're able to get that little bit extra loan, that helps. Also, if you go into commercial too early, sometimes you don't get those loan terms as long as you'd like on commercial. So even though the income's great, those loan terms being lower can actually hinder your servicing for some subsequent residential properties because their loan terms might be on 5, 10, 15 years, and the banks on their back end treat their repayments as quite high in comparison. So from that perspective, it's something to consider, but I would say two parts. Either you've built a healthy residential portfolio, you want to add more income stream, and you're okay with what you built. That's one. Or number two is you actually intend to go down more commercial properties. You're a business owner. You're able to build cash deposits far quicker than the typical person on a salary. And you feel like commercial is far more of the way you want to go in your portfolio building. You're more comfortable with the risks. And so you go into multiple commercials from the get-go versus even any residential holdings. Sure, you won't build up as much of a portfolio, but you'll build up passive income almost immediately because if you can get 3 mil at 6 to 7%, there's your 100K on interest only passive income with a 30% deposit. And so I know it sounds crazy to go, hey, which regular person's walking around with a mil on a 3 mil portfolio, but divide that into 3 purchases over a few years to put that deposit together for a business owner. That's 3 years, 300 and something K per year, or 4 years, 200 and something K per year. Business owners out there's many out there who are doing that. So I feel like commercial sits in those two avenues. Either you're ready to just scale into an income immediately and you don't worry about that hedge, or you want residential properties and you move into it afterwards.
Okay.
Just one more question I wanted to ask. In regards to customers that are coming through, are you finding a lot of people using like company, like something that we've always discussed on the podcast, SMSF, self-managed super funds, because you talk a lot in regards to long term. So we're finding a lot of customers coming through investing for the SMSF, either residential or commercial, because it's something they see as a long term where they can actually access in their retirement, like tax-free kind of money. And we're obviously finding a lot of customers coming through trying to use companies or trusts involved to purchase. Are you finding a lot of customers shifting to that and to help their own personal borrowing capacity as well?
Yeah, I think in an information heavy world, we're definitely opening up more to more things than we were in the past. I could imagine that if we were talking about trusts and things back when I was on the dinner table, young with dad, they would overcomplicate the crap out of it and make them feel like the smartest person ever and how it's the super elite thing that dad does. But really, he was getting the tools and spanners out, working as a mechanic back in the day. So it wasn't the super elite thing, but they'd make it sound like that back in the day. And right now, I feel like the accountants are doing all the heavy lifting for the conversational piece, and Nowadays, more people are just jumping on Google, looking at pros and cons, forums, brokers, accountants. It's just a much more information-friendly world. So definitely, I think the trajectory is that more of these things will pop up more and more as time goes on. Secondly, I also think that people want to take charge. From, you back in the days, you used to see certain companies and they were just always put on the spotlight and in a good way and in the limelight, and everything was just, hey, these are the biggest and the best, and you just follow the order and put your money there. Nowadays, there's stories left, right, and center about how they charge too many fees, how they don't perform as well. It's just more and more transparency is coming into the world, and underperformance is becoming, you know, called out more than ever in this information world. So as a result, we're just going to get to that trend and trajectory where more and more people are taking that future into their own hands and setting them up. I think where SMSF can be huge is that commercial properties can be big, right? If you can get to 1 to 2 commercial properties in an SMSF that over 20 to 25 years, you start at 45 and you're able to then have those two pay themselves off come 65, 75. You get into a state where whatever debt you've got remaining in your outside portfolio come retirement, 2 debt-free commercial properties will end up supercharging and covering repayments for anything and everything else you have in that portfolio by that time. So, yeah, I think they can be great things. Obviously, there's still a bit of a divide in the costs of lending for those versus the cost of lending outside. I hope that with this popularity, more competition comes in this space, because I think the big four getting out of that was just a stupid move. Because now I feel that we're going to go through another surge in that, and more smaller providers are going to see market share capability going into that space. And if they can get more and more competition up, we may see those rates come down, because right now competition is a big part of what's keeping those rates high, or lack of competition. Yeah.
I might just shift the conversation towards the current market and what's happening at the moment. So last week or 2 weeks ago, the Labor Party won the election, and there's, like you said before, people kind of have their friends and they've got the media, and the media's they've gone wild with property market's going to crash, property market's going to boom, Labor this, Labor that. What do you see on the floor? You're obviously on the floor every single day, and I think I know the answer, but what do you think? Is there going to be a difference with Labor, coming into power, into government, in terms of the real estate market, or will the real estate market do what it needs to do, irrespective of who's won the election?
Yeah, the election ones, it's so weird. It stumps me every time, like as in like just human behavior. I hear from sales agent colleagues who go, "Oh yeah, it's election time, few people holding off." I'm like, what are they holding off for? Like, have they ever been able to explain why? And like, I think the furthest an explanation's gotten is, "Oh, no, I'll just hold off until after election." So like, there's no reason why. Like, no one's still able to elaborate on why. Like, they just think like, I think it's like this one moment of the year or the campaigns when it happens that property investors can kind of feel like stock investors, where they think like this news cycle will immediately change 100 fundamentals. It just doesn't work like that. It's not the stock market where someone can put out a tweet and tank a whole market or something like that. So I think the main thing is coming back to what happens. No, like it doesn't make a huge difference. There are, on the both sides of their equation, they had support policies for first home buyers. And I think that's the flavor. When it comes to something though that will be interesting is the Labor's taken a little bit more of an approach on household balance sheets, so cash flow, childcare subsidies, continuing on with the certain tax cuts that are coming in, phased out over the years ahead. Planning to look into wages and what the minimum wages should be. So why that's important to call out is a lot of media isn't quite talking about them, but over the years ahead, some of these policies will create 10 to 15 grand more on a 150 to 200K earner's bottom line into their pockets. That's huge. Like 10 to 15 grand more is another holiday. You know what I mean? It's a lot of cash. It's not a small, like we saw the impact of what stimulus payment made in inflation data, just like to each household for a few $100s or a couple thousand, whatever it was. But the main thing is this will make a lot of money. So I think what will happen though is something that's going to show over the next few years is either households will be more comforted with some of the rising costs, but it's a catch-22 because if you throw more cash back into the economy, inflation will also continue picking up. I just think that right now that's probably the only thing that stands out is there's just going to be more liquidity in households, which will probably offset some of the expenses that are rising over the years ahead. But I don't see any major shifts from that political piece to do with property markets.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and kind of that's what I expected you to say. So I'm glad. What about from a perspective of the interest rates rising and it's expected to continue to rise? Do you feel like that will have a larger impact on the current market, and I say market being a very loose term, but are you seeing issues with interest rates going up in terms of buying properties or people selling properties?
Interest rates will make an impact to some markets for sure. It'd be silly of anyone to assume it doesn't make impact. It's the cost of money, and the cost of money is directly tied to two things. One is borrowing capacity, because the assessment rate is no longer fixed. It's now a moving assessment rate that moves with a buffer on top of interest rates. And the second thing is it impacts household, cash flow and household balance sheets of what funds they'll have available or readily available for spending. And also the third thing actually is it'll impact sentiment, right? So there is going to be impact. Anyone thinking no, it's silly. But where the impact will happen, again, is not this blanket approach thing that media keeps giving it constant juice on. Like, it's not going to be blanket approach. Because if interest rates were a blanket approach impactor, why did Perth and Darwin go through its biggest decline ever as we were in the greatest interest rate falling cycle that we've ever seen? 2012 to 2020, interest rates have fallen off a cliff. Like, that chart from the RBA is just massive, just going down. Yet Perth and Darwin went through the biggest declines. Like, why? Like, if this blanket approach thing worked, everywhere should have boomed from 2012 onwards. Brisbane and Adelaide didn't even start rising until 2019. They were rising, but pretty average. So if there weren't the same blanket effect on the way down, they're not going to be the same blanket effect on the way up. So that's the first part. Where will there be impact? Well, we actually did a lot of research into this, and one thing we take a lot of pride in our business is having our own internal research division where Jung and I, we run through insights and figure out what we're seeing and what's happening out there. We've got a section on our website called Property Market Research, which is under the investigate.com.au website. And we've got a section in that property market research called White Papers. For these white papers, one of them was inspired by University of South Australia. Professor Leishman and Jung connected in our team, and they connected and talked about their methodology used on valuing markets as over or undervalued in the Uni of SA. We took that methodology, applied some tweaks at it from our inspiration from them, and reviewed it further. And then we reviewed that and applied it across two regions. Number one was the 8 capital cities, and number two was the 25 most populated regional cities. So this is pretty much everywhere investable, right? Like major investable towns. And what we found was with December ending data, we looked at that and we found that of the regions, there were some that were undervalued and were overvalued. And how we did this analysis was looking at it from the most important piece, serviceability of mortgages. Like, can you afford to pay it, right? Because interest rates, I hate seeing this whole household debt to income. It makes no difference if it's all about repayment to income. You know what I mean? Because that's the main thing. Yes, high household debt makes it more sensitive because it's greater debt, but you've got to look at the bottom line at the end of the day, none of these top line figures. So when we looked at it, we took this scenario: a dual income household that has to pay 30% of their mortgage, of their household's income towards mortgage repayments. We took a 30-year P&I term, we took an 80% loan, and we took it at 2 interest rates. 3.5%, which is the higher end of some interest rates today, and then 4.5%, which is stretched out to the higher end if rates rise further and further going ahead. And what we wanted to see was, based on the median price now, and what the repayments are of that interest rate 30-year term P&I at 80%, how much would house prices have to fall or rise to make that repayment match a dual income household's income of 30% going towards mortgage payments? So if you were paying as a dual income household, $1,000 towards your mortgage payments in the current, but 1,300 was the 30% mark, it was an undervalued market because it could go up and you'd still be at the 30% or less. And so when we applied this measure, we could then say, how much do house prices have to rise or fall to be fair valued? And it was really interesting. Places like, Sydney were quite a lot undervalued. We had Greater Sydney undervalued by 35%. We had Greater Melbourne undervalued by 16%. These are assuming the 4.5% interest rate, so stress testing it even further, like assuming a few more rate rises happen. We had Greater Brisbane undervalued by 25%, Greater Adelaide undervalued by 39%, Perth undervalued by 63%, Hobart undervalued by 14%. So you can see there's undervalued, there's overvalued, ACT overvalued by 13%, and then some regional areas, Geelong slightly overvalued by 4%, Townsville undervalued by 110%, which is huge. So what this means here is that you're going to see a varying impact. It doesn't mean that prices will fall by these percentages, because payment of income is just one part. People don't, like, this isn't the stock market world again, coming back to it, where people aren't living in these houses and they just can, sell everything, lose 40% just because it's declining. That's not going to happen. But the main thing is that there are overvalued households that are using more than 30% of their income to pay mortgage or payments in certain cities, and they will see repayments hurt them more for those specific households. They'll either find a way and not spend anything else, and business income will be suffered in those local areas, or they will not be comfortable with, look to sell it, and perhaps join many others looking to sell and creating some discounts, right? But then there'll be other areas of the country which you'll see property prices continue to boom ahead, only because their interest rates are similar to what, the house prices are similar to what they were in 2012 or 2013, and interest rates were 6 to 7% then. So it doesn't really matter if they go back up to there. So very different across the country.
Yeah. I'm conscious that a lot of our listeners are, first time buyers or investors, or haven't got into the market before, and might be listening to all this and thinking, oh, this is very complicated, very, very complex. And I was thinking, do you have any advice for, here's this guy with this humongous portfolio talking to me, he doesn't understand me. Do you have any advice to someone that's a first time investor? Where do they start? How do they start? Where would you start if you're a first time investor?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. So from a first-time investor, the principles pretty much are the same. Number one, in this environment where you might be unsure of the interest rates rising and things like that, do you have a personal circumstance that you feel comfortable with? Money that you can leave aside for a buffer, income that is obviously servicing a mortgage and servicing for your borrowing capacity, and you feel comfortable using it, and then cash flow on the deal that you look to buy that you feel comfortable in holding. So that's the first part, assessing household. The second thing is looking across the country. If we can look across the country, you're going to maximize your chance of getting the best result. You can also maximize the number of markets that you can fit in your budget that might be smaller. And then number three is making sure that we come back to the core points that I've shared here, which is every market across the country is going to offer different types of conditions. And the more you can come back to point two, which is the whole different parts of the country, you're going to be able to operate even in these times and have a great result. The end of the day is the goals are the same, whether you're 8 million in or your first property in. You want to create wealth for your family, have multiple streams of income, feel somewhat comfortable for yourself or your family down the track, and look to enjoy life at some stage, whether it's sooner or later, depending on how much you want or how much you give it a go. And so with that in mind, the main thing is both of us have a goal in common. And so both of us have something in common also, which is time. I can't achieve my goal. Even with an 8 mil portfolio, I still have debt on it. And if I've got debt on it, There's no sitting back on the beach. Do you know what I mean? So as a result, sure I can go on interest only for a bit, enjoy it for a bit, but that's 3, 4 years of just having a good time before the banks call me up and go, hey, so your interest only is finishing, and I tell them, oh shit, I forgot to work and show you a payslip, show you an income, and I need to get this interest only extended. Those days are gone. Like people forget that whether you have a 5 mil, 10 mil, 15 mil portfolio, even if you have 5 mil debt, that's still not a great passive income if it's on P&I. You know what I mean? Like after P&I, most of the fantastic stories you hear about huge portfolios have very little income that you can take from it. So the truth is we're both in the same position, whether you're one property in or 8 mil, we just have a different goal and we're going to get to that in a different way. And as a result, we both need time. And so if you're going to be paralysis by analysis stuck, is this the time, not the time? Every year that you have less to compound wealth is the harder it's going to get to your goals. And whether you're in Sydney, whether you're in Townsville, whether you're buying in Perth, guess what? Over 30 years, most of these markets have a 5 to 7% window of 30-year average compound growth per annum. 5 to 7%. So the truth is, everyone can seem like a hotshot buying in certain windows and certain great areas and certain hotspots and stuff. Yeah, sure. They'll get there, probably kill a bit of opportunity cost at the start. But if you're keeping your buying momentum and you have the power of time, probably both end up in the same location anyway when it comes to overall results per asset. They might have acquired more assets, but overall results per asset would be probably similar if you're holding a 30-year window. So the key is the more paralysis by analysis, the more you put it to the side, you're just going to make it harder for yourself down the track.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, Fede, do you have any other questions for Arjun?
I just have to ask the P9 interest only question. So this is a conversation that Cam and I have a lot of the time, and over time I obviously gone for a buyer's agent. I didn't understand strategies in regards to what strategy each customer is going for. But you say that obviously going on interest only, there's going to have that cash flow, and that's 100% true. But I guess I want to know what happens at the end. How long are you on that interest only term? Or is there ever a situation where, I guess we know the answer to, but is there a time where you guys go on P9 to pay that debt off? Or is it always going to be debt with a good cash flow coming through?
Yeah, it's so important for people to know this earlier on because then they get set up with a reality and expectation in mind rather than, hey, bought this property 450, rents for 400, 8K positive cash flow. Yeah, but for how long?
Yeah.
Like it's not cash flow forever. Like it's P&I soon.
Yeah.
I would say two things. If you're a business owner and there's no need for you to retire because at some stage there's going to be leverage, right? For example, as time's gone on, I've built a team. Our team has 11, and with this team of 11, it's supported me immensely to be able to work with very specific clients and work with a limited amount of clients in my own perspective. So leverage in a business owner's life is going to allow them from a team perspective and growth in business that they could possibly be interest only forever. Never one day pay their debts down. When they're getting old, they can just whack in an exit strategy there via their broker, and then the banks will be happy to give them loan terms until they're 120.
Yeah.
And it's true. The brokers know that as well. You put in a good exit strategy, someone's 70, they'll still give them a good 30-year loan.
Yeah.
I'm yet to know that 100-year-old person that's paying it back, but I mean, I'm sure it works. So I think the main thing is if they're a business owner, they're getting tax returns, they're still running a business, they've got leverage, never pay P&I, stick on interest only forever, collect the cash flow the whole life through, and just keep refinancing it every time, and you'll be fine. So that's that type of person. If it's the person that's not going to see themselves leveraged with an income forever and they want to see themselves toned down, whether it's a business owner in a smaller business that wants to tone down the work they physically do or mentally do, or someone in a salary, I believe in building a portfolio with 3 distinct phases: acquisition, optimization, consolidation, AOC. Acquiring is best acquired in a tight buying window. So by that I mean 5 years, 10 years, portfolio value number. So it could be, I want to stop buying when I hit 10 mil. I want to stop buying when I hit 5 mil. I want to stop buying at 35. I want to stop buying at 40. The key thing I said in all scenarios was stop buying, because debt is your friend to grow, but debt is not your friend to derive an income. So now we move to optimize. Optimize is boring. Hardly any investors listen here, but you need it. And this is where you just don't buy anything. Just sit on your ass, do nothing. Let time take care of its thing. If you didn't do anything for the last 2 years and you held a few assets, you probably made millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So how good is sitting your ass doing nothing? It's happening, you know, when it comes through, rents have exploded. Like most of my properties are up $100, $50, $80. So imagine that as well. So that's the power of doing nothing, creating debt today where it stays, rents go up, values go up, debt's worth less, inflation is making that debt worth less. And then on top of that, you can even optimize. This is why it's called optimize, being refinancing loans, stretching them out to 30 years again, keeping that interest only alive, looking at your insurance policies, maybe doing the smallest of renos to increase your rents. I just spent 150K in a reno on my Tassie place, completely transformed my unit block, and my rents have gone up from 720 to 1250. 150K to create an extra $530 of rent. That's a huge return. I don't know any property out there for 120K getting 530 unless you're one of my friends in Broken Hill. So with that being said, that means now all of a sudden optimizing, it's time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Consolidation is where you make passive income. All this stuff you hear about, the deal happens on the buy. It's all about the buy. You want deals and good buys. Baloney, bullcrap. The real money happens when you consolidate. So when you're consolidating, you've got a few ways you can consolidate. Aggressive, sell a few assets, pay off remaining debt, pay off most of it. Either or. Number 2 is passive, turning it to P&I during your optimized phase, and just chipping away at it. Whatever's left over, you re-stretch your loans to 30-year terms again. So this is passive. Number 3 is a combination of the two. This is where you're starting to sell some properties to clear some debt, and then with the remaining debt, you keep it P&I and stretch it out 30-year terms. So now you've got an actual creation of a stream of income. So up until consolidation, unless you're taking it the passive way and you don't want to sell anything because you feel like perhaps my income's not high enough to buy multiples, so I don't want to sell, because if you buy 4 and then sell 2 and you only live to 2, that might not give you the income that you want come retirement. So when you decide P&I is when you decide your consolidation journey. And so I would say interest only is your best friend at the start, because it's just one less thing to worry about, a repayment less to worry about. It's more cash in your offset. It's more liquidity, control of your money. In some cases, depending on which bank you're at, it might help you with servicing. With those other banks, some it won't. It'll put it down. And so, yeah, you just look at it from that perspective on the acquisition, optimize, consolidate. At your consolidation point is when it's the mark where you have to go, okay, how am I going to get enough debt down and enough rents up to make something? Because none of the passive income stories on the buy are sustainable unless you plan to be on interest only forever.
Did you get your answer, Freddy?
I'm just looking for KM smirk on the side.
Me and Freddy are having a constant discussion, not an argument, just a discussion about P&I. First interest only. Mark, did you have anything else to ask before I ask my final one? I was just going to ask one last question. Obviously being a buyer's agent and yourself being a buyer's agent, and I've seen the industry change a lot, and over the last 4 years, and you've been in it, I think a year longer than I have. What do you see as the buyer's agent's role in the real estate industry? You mentioned with your own personal portfolio and your journey, your first batch of properties or your first batch of investments, the analysis was not good from the professional that was helping you. How do you see the buyer's agent role now in the industry, and has it changed over time, and the importance of a buyer's agent?
Yeah, so I think the role is changing over time now, because it's starting to change from only a select few using it to, hey, this is the only way to use it. And I think it's just a start. It's not going to be it's going to be still a long time away until that happens, but I do see it becoming a very much an overseas market thing where it's just part of it. Like you just feel like, hey, everyone's so busy. And as think of little examples of just Amazon, right? Like, did you hear those crazy stories with Amazon? Someone saying like the workers couldn't even go and take a pee because like the stress in the
Yeah.
shift was so crazy. Now I know this example might go, where the hell are we going here, Arjun? Like, where's this going? But the main thing I'm trying to get to is that with this world we're heading into, people's time is going to be the rarest commodity ever. Businesses are going to go stuff you unless you're putting in all your effort, like every single moment. People are going to realize that to stay in this world where the wealth gap is dividing from the rich and poor to like no time we've ever seen, that to stay in this world, you're probably going to work multiple jobs. Hustle will be the coolest thing out, and everyone's going to be, doing that. And so as a result, people are just going to find ways and parts of their life to just not make mistakes because they're going to realize how hard it was to work to save all that money and get it going, or save time. And so this is not just a buyer's agent thing. This is going to be restaurants and eating out will be more popular than ever as time goes on. Like everything, just time will be so tough. So I think as a result, yes, we're definitely going to see our industry change to be more of a norm as part of transacting from that time piece alone. We're seeing off markets become more of a norm, like agents are more understanding of that being a whole new channel. And if you add up all the buyers agents who do between 20 and 40% of their channels going towards off market, then all of a sudden you realize, hey, that's a whole lot of property that doesn't hit the portal. So that's going to be another piece. And I think, what's going to pick up more in popularity more than ever is actually the localized buyers agents. There's a lot of information out there that over time that will get easier to digest. So people will have the information in their hands, and then they'll just kind of be saying, hey, ring local buyers agent, sort it out for me. So
Yeah.
I think that's becoming more popular as time goes on, which is why as the opposite of that, a national investor buyers agent, I need to constantly innovate and be ahead of the game and making sure that our research is making all the headlines and being out there because we want to be ahead of what any sort of digital information provider could provide through power of our interpretation, which is the skill set that many people need years or hundreds of transactions and experiences and back testing and data to look at. So I feel like over the years ahead, the industry is definitely heading towards more of a normalized part of the real estate world and more of a commonplace. But I do think those geographic buyers agents decades ahead are going to have a pretty good advantage there.
Yeah, it's a very interesting answer. Mate, you're obviously one of the number one buyers agents in this country. If anyone listening wants to get in contact, where can they find you? How can they reach out to get your help with their own portfolios and whatnot?
Yeah, they can reach out to us on investorkit.com.au. So that's INVESTORKIT, Investorkit. Just a heads up that, coming towards end of financial year, we are getting the craziest amount of requests we have ever been getting. So I think everyone kind of like the election bullcrap timing. It's like, end of financial year. Oh, we got to think of buying a property. I don't know how that works, but it does. So yeah, just be mindful that, to get that request in as soon as you can, because we are probably going to head to a stage where we were late November last year, October last year, where we actually shut off our website consultation form for 3 months, 2 or 3 months, and just said request to join a wait list. So I do encourage anyone wanting to reach out to us to jump onto it as soon as possible on investorkit.com.au.
Yeah, cool. And we'll put your details in the show notes as well. So if anyone's listening, they can find the details there. Thank you so much, Arjun. That was a really unbelievable episode. I think we got an accountant next week. It's going to be very hard for them to follow that up.
Hey, I'll make sure I'll tune into that episode if you can rip into them on trust and everything and get them to explain every single benefit, because there's days I wake up and I'm like, oh, this is amazing, I'm glad I have it. And there's days I wake up and go, hold on a minute, wait a minute, why do I even have this crap? So if they can help me make it as simple as easy so I can go to sleep and not have these constant roller coaster emotions, I appreciate that. So,
yeah, we'll send you the link. Ferdy's definitely got a lot of questions ready for that accountant. So
he's going to be sweating.
We'll send you the link once that's done. No, thank you so much for your time and for joining us. And hopefully you enjoyed it and enjoyed being with us. And hopefully it's not the first, not the only time you come on our podcast. Hopefully you have some time for us again. I know you're very busy, but hopefully you find some more time to come on.
Guys. Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure to meet you all and be on the show and keep doing great things.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Arjun.
awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
No
mate.
worries.
Enjoy Top Gun.
See ya.
See ya.